Hello, Blastpop here. Today I'm looking at Veracruz, the U.S. invasion of Mexico, 1847. This was published by SPI in 1977. It was designed by Richard Berg. This game first appeared in the Strategy and Tactics magazine number 63. It was published almost simultaneously in a flat box version tray that we have here, as well as the magazine. It is essentially a regimental, divisional level game of the U.S. landings in Veracruz, Mexico, culminating in the capture of Mexico City. It harkens back in terms of map design and graphics to an earlier, simpler era that was mastered by Redmond Simonson, who was able to do more with less graphically and still provide an interesting map and graphics. As you can see, it came in the old flat box SPI tray, complete with places to store your counters. This copy has been unplayed, and I've been meaning to play it for some years. What had put me off a little bit is that there's some limited intelligence that is used by flipping the counters over, so you're not quite sure what force you're encountering. And there's also some dummy counters. But having read on Board Game Geek and some other places, it's more cut and dried, so it's not really and truly necessary to have a good game, so the solitaire suitability is higher than one would expect. Also included in the boxed version is a rules book and historical information. So the actual book itself comes in at 32 pages, and the actual rules are less than that, and according to this, 13 pages. Additionally, in centerbound in this edition, you have the charts and tables you need to play the game. A traditional odds table, casualty tables based on morale, and a die roll, percentage loss, and an assault table, sieges, disease attrition table, and battle morale table. Quite an interesting combination of rules. Not only do you have sieges, but you also have a rule called La Vomito, disease and attrition. That kind of is a rather interesting title for rules. As I alluded to, the limited intelligence supply, you have pack animals, mules that carry supply for the American player so that they can continue offensive operations. The counters: combat strength, movement allowance, leadership, in this case for Santa Anna, army markers. And you have a fairly extensive, for the time period at least, that this game was published, a sequence of play. You have the Mexican turn followed by the United States turn, and you have a Mexican supply phase, Mexican reinforcement phase, guerrilla phase, political phase, movement phase, combat phase. And then the U.S. is supply, reinforcement, movement, rally, combat, disease, and attrition phase. And typical rules of the era. Not a lot of illustrations, mostly of counters. Rather text heavy, but the rules are complete. There's your mules, sieges. Very concise in terms of writing. SPI rules, if you could follow them, which to me they were a little legalese, but they were pretty straightforward, and I like that style of rules writing. Most rules writing nowadays is more of a narrative style. Gunboats. Then the counters, one sheet of them, 200 counters. The USA, Mexico, and system counters. Supply counters, there's your mules. The dummies that I had alluded to. Guerrillas. The backside. And with Mexican units, you also have some untried units. And the untried rules for counters, I believe, first appeared in SPI's Invasion America, quickly followed by Panzer Group Guderian and its series, and used off and on elsewhere, where neither side had a good handle on how effective their forces would be in any given situation. For the era, they're nice counters. They're clean, they're crisp, and they're the brown core. And at that time, they didn't have white core counters. At least games I've never ever seen. And U.S. invasion starts here, and they got to work their way across Mexico to these various roads, by this one road, all the way to Mexico City, way over here. And because the U.S.'s supplies are limited and must be mostly road-bound, except in situations where they do have mules, the U.S. is going to be mostly working its way across the map. The Mexicans are going to put up defenses in various places to try and slow up the Americans. And so it's a interesting situation. You've got two different types of forces involved. And then the game runs 25 turns. And you have reinforcements coming on the board at various times for both sides. And both sides have their own set of markers for divisions, and your own set of charts on either side facing the player. So the American will sit on this side, and the opposite side will be the Mexican player. The game is considered to be a classic, and as I've mentioned before, I would like to give this game a go, although I've never had, even though I've had it for some years. It was one of Richard Berg's earlier designs, and while the design is not exactly state-of-the-art, it is a well-constructed game, and is liked by quite a few people. Well, this gives you an idea of this older Veracruz game looks like by SPI. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and a bit of a look back into our wargaming history. Please like, comment, and subscribe. This has been Blastpop. Bye.